Hello everyone. Welcome to Wellspring Wednesday Evening Chapel. I light this chalice thinking of all of you. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, the light of truth, and the warmth of love. Welcome. And as we gather, and we do so every Wednesday at Wellspring Wednesday, we begin by sharing our stones of joy and our stones of sorrow. And we know that many of you have joys that you are discovering as you shelter in place, or you have essential jobs that take you away from those homes. And we know that we also hold stones of sorrow as we recognize that our lives are very different than they used to be. So I welcome you in your own homes to think about your own stones of joy and your own stones of sorrow, and how joy and sorrow are woven into every human life. And I want to tell you a story out of my own life. This involves my father's family. My father grew up in a small town in southwestern Iowa, and he had a beloved older brother who was a great athlete and full of energy and extremely bright, and just kind of the golden child of the small town. Everyone knew John, and he had great promise. And one day he came home and he wasn't feeling very well, and he developed a very high fever. Well, it turned out that my Uncle John developed polio and became very, very ill, and was taken away from his family to save the other children in the family and placed in a sanatorium, one, to help save his life, but also to quarantine him from the rest of the family. He was there for a long time, but he managed to survive, and no one else in his family developed polio. Out of that experience, my Uncle John became disabled and lived walking on crutches his whole life. So he didn't have the kind of life that his family had imagined. He became a very successful attorney, but he didn't have that physically active life that he had imagined. And my father learned a great deal from the suffering that his brother and the rest of his family endured, and other families that were struck by the polio epidemic. And he decided as a young man to devote himself to the path of public health, and studied in college and then in graduate school so that he could devote himself to public health. And he became what's called a sanitation engineer. That doesn't mean he was picked up trash. It means that he devoted himself to public health and to public health standards. And I remember as a young child how excited he was when Jonas Salk was able to separate and develop a new polio vaccine. This happened in 1955. And when this vaccine was discovered and shared that this vaccine had been discovered, and people had been working on it for a number of years, church and community bells rang all over the world because this vaccine held such promise. And as a young child, I remember standing in line to receive my first polio vaccine, which was in a cube of sugar. But we went to the local school and got our vaccines there, and then of course from then on, any boosters that we got, any other vaccines that we got, happened at the doctor's office. But my father was devoted to eradicating illness and disease. he was also devoted to the quality of our environment. And he knew that as we degraded our own earth and our environment, that there were going to be trade-offs and that new diseases were likely to emerge. And he used to warn us about this and that connection between the earth and our human community. And so I just want to share this story, that there are people all over the globe who care about our public health, who care about our mental health, and care about working to find a vaccine for the coronavirus and for other viruses and challenges that will continue to enter into our world. And I just lift up this story of my father because he devoted his life to public health after seeing what suffering was carried by his family, but particularly his brother, and how they triumphed over that suffering and went on to live meaningful and purpose-filled life. So thank you. And I will ask you to join with me in singing, in closing, the Chalice Song. It's a blessing we were born, and it matters what we do. What we know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty we love be what we do, and we don't have to do it alone. Thank you so much for joining us at Wellspring Wednesday Worship. Have a good evening.